guys, welcome back to another episode of Ngobrol Yuk, Alumni Edition. My name is Tiffany and I am going to be hosting with Dixie as usual. And Adika will also be hosting with us this time.
Hi everyone, my name is Dixie and I'm currently a sophomore attending Indiana University. And I will now pass it on to Adika, our special host today.
Hello everyone. Yeah, I'm gonna be the special host just for this podcast. And I'm excited to be hosting along with Tiffany and Dixie and to be asking our guest, Chris.
Hi everyone. Not my turn yet.
I wanted to introduce. So this is our guest today. Her name is Chris, and I'll hand it over to Chris to introduce herself.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm super excited to be in this podcast, and I hope what I'm gonna share with you will be helpful for you. But a little bit about myself. My name is Chris, and I am a Stanford alumni. I studied international policy at Stanford, and currently I'm working as a data and policy analyst at Acumen, which is a healthcare consulting firm based in California right now. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So how's things been going for you? You're currently located in California, right?
Mm-hmm. Things are going great. I mean, we're going into Thanksgiving week, so that's great. A lot of break. Yeah, like I am currently based in Palo Alto in California, so still very close to campus. How about you all? How are you doing?
Doing great. Enjoying the break. Definitely much needed break after a long semester.
Yeah, I'm having my break soon enough, and yeah, looking forward to it too.
Yeah,
that's great to hear.
I think a lot of students are going into Thanksgiving, so hopefully this podcast would be entertaining for them to listen during the break as well.
I guess we can deep dive into the questions right now. So I saw that your bachelor degrees was from UCLA, and if you have to pick one, would you pick Stanford or UCLA?
That's a great question. I got a lot of questions like that from people. I think personally, it's hard for me to pick one just because I did not go to both schools for the same levels. Like I went to UCLA for undergrad and then grad school, which is inherently different, like designed differently from undergrad programs. I went to Stanford, so I wouldn't know, I wouldn't be able to compare apple to apple. But I can definitely share like my experiences at each school at the different levels, and I'll let it up to the audience. So yeah, just generally UCLA versus Stanford. UCLA is a public university, and while Stanford is a private nonprofit university, so that in itself, I guess, impact a lot of different aspects of the school and the experience that you get. So for instance, at UCLA, the class size tend to be bigger than in Stanford, just because like your cohort tends to be larger in size than at a private institution like Stanford. So at UCLA, I experienced more competition to like enroll in the classes that I need to take to finish my degree. Whereas at Stanford, usually the core classes are not hard to get into. But then there are a few classes that are very like hot and very demanded. So for example, we had like a data analytics class where it is designed differently. So it doesn't look like a normal class. It is closer to like a boot camp almost. And so they, when introducing the class to people, when they're trying to recruit students, they marketed the class as like, it's great because a lot of the alum of the class itself, regardless of their major, often get like great job offers in data. And so that was like a big selling point for the class. And you can imagine like everybody from all over the campus, regardless of your major, regardless of your level of study. So you could be undergrad, you could be grad, you could be at PhD level, you can apply to that class. And if you get accepted, like for the next 6 months, it's going to be like intense 2 hour a day kind of class. So for those kind of like very specifically designed, very specially designed classes, there were so like the competition was intense to the point that you had to fill out like a Google form application. Or you have to tell them like, I want to take these classes because of this. And yeah, like generally like to sum up about like competition for classes, at UCLA, it's more about, there's more competition because of the size and the number of students. Whereas at Stanford, the competition for these hot classes tend to be, you're judged on like your potential and if you have like entrepreneurship ideas, for instance, regardless of your major or background. And then that's class. And then the fact that it's public versus private university also has an impact in the funding that is available to the students. So I feel like at UCLA, so at both UCLA and Stanford, I applied for scholarships from the school itself. And UCLA tends to be more competitive in terms of giving out funding, just because there are more students applying for it and there's less available funding per student. And then for Stanford, they tend to be more generous. Like in my cohort, I think a lot of people got funding, some kind of funding, not full ride, but some kind of funding. So yeah, and like it was never hard to, I guess, to have to like, oh, I'm interested in this project, I need funding for it. There's always, if you go to your professor or your advisor, they would always be able to like point you, oh, okay, I know that there's this source of funding, maybe you could apply to it, and then hook you up with like the right person or something. But at UCLA, it was much harder to do that, at least in my experience, that was the case. In terms of specialties, I think like area wise, UCLA campus is very close to Hollywood, and so they have very strong film studies. Where like you have actually Hollywood actors, actresses, producers like teaching as like professors at UCLA film program. But for Stanford, because we're at the heart of the Silicon Valley, it's very tech entrepreneurial like spirit or vibe, where we have a lot of industry experts from the tech industry or cyber security, for instance. Yeah, in terms of opportunity though, I want to say that like UCLA sort of better prepare us for real life, just because I think you are required to be resourceful and self-sufficient at UCLA, whereas at Stanford, because there's abundance of like funding and like direction, guidance, it's not hard to forge one-to-one relationship with mentors and professors. Whereas at UCLA, you have to sort of overcome challenges to get to that point. So yeah, it's hard to choose because both are great. If you want to be a leader, I think it's a great place to be at UCLA, because then you get to experience in a safe learning space in a college setting where you could learn these leadership skills that you might not necessarily learn if you end up in a very protected environment such as in Stanford. That's my honest opinion.
I thought Stanford would be like more geared towards leadership since it's like located in Silicon Valley and all, as
Yeah.
opposed to like UCLA.
Yeah, I think both definitely highlights like they look for leadership ability and stuff, but the difference is that at UCLA you kind of have to adopt that leadership ability to survive, whereas like at Stanford it's more like, oh, here we're gonna tell you how to be a great leader. These are the ways, these are the people that you can connect to, that could provide you with like more opportunities or something. So it like the way that I like to think about it is it's more hand holding almost, which could be great. Like it could be great, definitely. Like if you find yourself in that kind of situation, you definitely want to take advantage of that, right? And basically, I guess, take all the opportunities that you get. But at the same time, my experience at UCLA really taught me how to like think and like be resourceful. Just try to pull all the resources and network that I have to like make this work for myself, because it's just so hard. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I don't know, like UCSD juga rada, they don't really handhold you.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting to hear. In Stanford, there's more handholding.
Yeah.
Than
In a good
UCLA.
way though. In a good
So
way.
hard to get into. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like a privilege. But like I said, if you find yourself in that kind of environment, like by all means take it, right? Like take advantage of the environment. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's just move on to the Next question. I mean, it's about graduate school as well.
Yeah.
But like, why did you decide to pursue like 2 master's degree? Because I know you went to one in Indo, right, in UPH, and the other one is like in Stanford, like you said. Maybe you could go over like your decision process and like what's the difference between like Indo and in like US master's program.
Definitely. To give the audience more context, so before I went to Stanford, I started at Stanford in 2018. 3 years back, I just graduated, like in 2015, I just graduated from UCLA, and I decided to go home because at that point I was already abroad for almost 8 years, and I didn't feel a strong connection to Indonesia. And I felt the need to reconnect. So I went home, and then when I was home, I sort of, I wanted to explore what the for-profit and business landscape looks like back in Indonesia. So my background at UCLA, it was a degree in political science, and most of my real-world experiences revolve around policy making and nonprofit work. Um, my ultimate interest is in the international development and poverty alleviation. The nonprofit, the profit, and the government sector. These are three sectors, major sectors that have a lot of roles to fill in advancing a nation's development. And so, because I already had a lot of experiences with nonprofit and governance or government generally, like I wanted to explore what the for-profit world looks like and what does the whole business perspective and mindset looks like. So then the question would be, like I was back home in Jakarta, so like I was looking at different programs, and then I stumbled upon this UPH program. It's an executive education program, so they also offered like a regular full-time master's program in business administration, but I chose to go with the executive education program because it was mainly because of the design. So it was designed differently from the typical local master's program, I guess. So the emphasis was on networking, and also it was part-time, which means I was able to do something else while taking classes. Classes are typically after work because people who enrolled in this program are also working at the same time. I also like that there was a lot of international exposure, and curriculum tend to be more relevant. I want to say the topics that we discuss are more relevant internationally and not only to Indonesia, or the local economy in Jakarta. I had lecturers who are professors from all over the world, which really gave me the rich perspective or diverse perspective to business or how to run a business. Yeah, and that's mainly why I decided to go with the UPH program in Masters of Management. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to specifically address Stanford again, or if that was clear enough.
Yeah, it's just interesting because I don't know a lot of people personally that has both masters in Indo and in US. It's usually like one or the other.
Yeah, at that point I wasn't, because I wanted to reconnect, so I was I was actually planning to stay. I didn't know I was gonna go to Stanford and stuff. I knew that eventually I might come back to the US to do further studies. But at that time, my mind was more, the further studies that I was talking about, I was specifically thinking about PhD programs. Yes. And so I thought it's not a bad idea to explore and see what a master's program back home looked like. But yeah, I ended up going to Stanford a few years after.
Yeah. Well, you said you're working in you want to work in development and all, right? I know you had previous experience in JPAL as well. What do you feel about going back to those kinds of work after Acumen, for example?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, ideally I would really want to go back to that line of work. So at Acumen, we do healthcare consulting, and we basically mainly work with US healthcare data. So it's very, very US oriented, and it's not as international as I want it to be. Definitely not focus on Indonesia, which was originally like my intention to focus on. I think the major challenge that I have with not going into a line of work that is more closer to the international development world right now is visa situation. You could do like a lot of the international development organizations. There are two different types, right? Generally, the international organizations such as World Bank or the UN, or you could also work in a more like local scale or smaller scale organizations such as a think tank or a nonprofit. Usually, if you go to a nonprofit or a think tank, they don't necessarily have a lot of funding to sponsor your visa if you're an international student. And also, they have a lot of people who are majoring in international development studies in the US who are Americans. And so it's really hard for them to justify to their stakeholders and like donors, why should we pay this extra money just to hire somebody international? And then as for like World Bank and like the bigger organizations, it is also possible. The only reason is that I would have to relocate outside California. But right now, I kind of want to stay because I feel like I I've built my support network in this
Yeah, that
area
makes
for the
sense.
past 2 years. But also another thing is that you can be a consultant at World Bank, but usually consultants are on contract, which means it's not stable. Like you don't have an H-1B basically. So you'd have to like worry about whether your contract is going to be like continued or not every 6 months or every year. And I really don't want to be in that position, not at this point in my life. So I chose to go with what's available and what is able to provide me sponsorship that is more stable.
Okay, yeah, that makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, that's really interesting. Fairly, just listening to your talk, just realized there's a lot of career options available for Indonesians in the US that can provide sponsorship, like you mentioned, the World Bank. And I wanted to circle back to your master's experience. Actually, I know a lot of students are actually wondering, after graduating from bachelor's, if they should take master's or not. What do you think is the best way to identify whether someone would need a master's degree or not?
Yeah. I think that is very, very like it's a very important question to address actually. So I think the most important thing that like a student have to like I guess ask themselves is, why do you want to do a master's program, right? Some people do it for the prestige, some people do it for the ROI, some people do it for personal learning, enlightenment. They just like to learn. What I have to say is that to identify whether you need a master's degree or not, yeah, it really depends on your goal, ultimately, what you're trying to achieve, because there are so many things that you can learn through the program. Yeah, like, so for example, I mean, let me just like, I guess I can go through some of like the more common reasons why people go ahead and pursue a master's program. So one, it's for career progression. If you ask me personally, I think everybody should get one, just because I've heard so many stories, from like a mid-level career person. Like my friends would be like, oh yeah, I'm basically stuck because I've been here for like a few years, but in order for me to get to a higher position or continue climbing up the corporate ladder, my supervisor told me that, oh, I have to get a master's, or they would rather hire somebody new with a master's program. So I think it's definitely necessary, personally, in today's world. Maybe not today, but it would definitely come in handy in the next 5 to 10 years, especially if you just graduated from undergrad. Like you might not think that, oh, that's like I need it urgently, but be rest assured, in 5 to 10 years, it's going to be helpful if you have one. So that's like my personal take. But then so that's one, right? Career progression. So you don't want to be stuck. And then some people, they're like, oh yeah, but I want to get some industry experience or work experience before the masters. I think that is also wise. So masters program, a lot of them, they are designed very like skill or expertise oriented. and people go, like, they're designed to be professionals program. And what that means is that you need to be, I don't want to say like you need to know for sure where you want to be in 5 to 10 years, right? But you need to at least have some more specific idea of where, like, the direction that you want to go before you get into a master's program, because otherwise, like, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of a master's program as much. And that's because, it's like master's program is very different from undergrad in the sense that, when we're an undergrad student, like I remember, looking at the different classes that I can take, I was like, oh, I want to explore there. I want to take this sociology class, that other class, that has nothing to do whatsoever with the work that you'll be doing later on in life. But at master's, because the cost is usually pretty high as well, like some people care about ROI or return on investment. Like if you're paying this much money to go to this top master's program in the world, might as well, you need to really take advantage of all of the resources that you have to reach the specific goals that you have after the master's program. So for example, I can give you examples like master's program like MBA or public policy or public administration masters. Like a lot of people come in not like they already know what they want to do, like what they want to reach by the end of the master's program. Oh, I want to go and do MBA because I'm trying to network with people from a certain industry, maybe tech industry or the healthcare industry. If you like knowing that goal at the end, it really helps you to guide your journey through the master's program, I guess, to be like, okay, because my goal is networking, then I'm going to focus on networking early on instead of just taking classes or just working for professors, but not making the connections that you intended to make at the end of the master's program. So yeah, so like a few reasons was like, career progression, skills or expertise oriented, and then networking, right? Or the industry connections that you want to make. So those are like few things or a few reasons that I heard commonly, people mention as the reason why they decided to do a master's. So yeah, for students who are fresh grad, don't rush too much. You should. I think we should take some time to think about what you want to achieve by the end of the master's program instead of just jumping or diving into a master's program right away after graduating.
The master's program sounds really fun. I feel like we got so many from Stanford. And so I bet from the viewers, pasti ada yang mau apply for master's ya. If you have to give advice untuk students di Indoni, what do you think they should do to apply for masters in the US?
Good question. I think it would a lot of it would depend on your background. So did you do a bachelor's degree in the US or did you do your undergrad somewhere else? Just because mainly the US, it would be easier to apply to another US institution if you had first graduated from a US or US oriented institution, just for reasons like your transcript would look differently, your GPA might be different, like the scale might not be out of 4, for instance. These are the things that are more, I guess it's not a challenge, but it adds another thing to your to-do list to start early and then try finding out what is required from the university that you're applying to sort of the conversion. How does that work? Is this going to be acceptable or not? So that's an additional step if you didn't go to a US system undergrad program. But in general, for everyone in terms of application, it is very wise if you not even application, even before applying, I think ideally my advice would be for them to reach out, identify people that you can talk to, be it current students, professors, or alumni of the programs that you're interested in, and conduct a lot of informational interviews just to get to know them, and with the goal of getting to know what the program is all about, what it is offering. And I say this because I think a lot of times we just take a look at the website, which contains a lot of information about the program, but not necessarily, it doesn't tell you what life is going to be like as a student there. And so it's always wise to reach out to current or previous students to get to know, oh, okay, the professors are very friendly, professors are very supportive, funding wise, how is it going, and stuff like that. Like these are not the things that you can easily find usually on the website. So do take the time to identify these people and then reach out to them and be like, hey, I am a prospective student, I'm thinking about applying, can we talk? Can we have like a 30-minute chat? It's very, very acceptable to do that. And so even though you didn't go to school in the US in undergrad, I think it would be a good idea to do that. Like don't hesitate to do that, basically. And then you would also want to start cultivating good relationships with your mentors and your professors or supervisors at work or internship. And I say this because you would be asked for recommendation letters when you're applying. And recommendation letters can really make it or break it for these applications. You could have great transcript, great writing sample, great personal essay, but then if your recommendation letters are not better than most people who applied, then it's going to be really hard to get accepted. And so if you have graduated and then you didn't have a mentor or a professor that you were close with in undergrad, don't worry, but start cultivating such relationships with people who would be able to provide you advice and recommendation letters as you go through the process later on. And ultimately start preparing for the application materials early. And that means start really looking into yourself and be introspective and brainstorm about how you would want to portray yourself or sell yourself or brand yourself, in the application. And yeah, just like really think about your passion, ultimately your goals in the long term, what do you want to achieve. These are very important, I guess, components of the personal essays. And it could, like, personal essays is, I think, one of the two, well, other than recommendation letters, personal essay is another very important component of the application. And then the rest of them, they're okay, like test scores, GPA, transcripts, and stuff like that. These are fine. Like they're not gonna, I would say that it's not the deciding factor, provided that you met a certain standard, of course. But yeah, really focus on personal essays and recommendation letters. Do you have like a specific follow-up question on that, Adika?
Oh no, it's just
Maybe
like
because
I thought they would like focus more on like the other stuff rather than the personal statement and recommendation letters.
yeah, I mean the other stuff are important too, but I think it's more of a system, like a threshold system, where if you
Oh
met
yeah.
certain threshold, then you sort of like
Okay.
they filtered through, and you got in. But like then they would zoom into your other stuff like personal essays and recommendation letters. So that's application wise. I think it's also very important that after accepting an offer from a university, you want to be mentally prepared to have your perspective widened or horizons widened. So you want to cultivate the right attitude for learning. So that includes humility and openness, willingness to learn, not only through formal channels like classes, but generally through everyone that you will meet at grad school. Because sometimes you don't know, you might be like, oh, okay, this is my friend, but then, oh, it turns out this is the friend that might get you that job some other day in the future. Yeah, be eager to like explore and try new things, and ultimately to fail repeatedly in the process. Don't be afraid to fail. Like that's very important, I think. And then another advice is for for those who have been out of school for a few years. I'm laughing because like I was sort of one of them. Um, it's a good idea, I think, to like before actually going to do the master's program, you want to try to enroll in short online courses, or watch some online tutorials for courses that you are interested in, or courses that might add value and help prepare you for the master's coursework. For a lot of majors, this could be research or statistical methods, but for some others, it could be programming classes, for instance. I think it's beneficial, not only that it helps you refresh what you might have learned in your undergrad years. It could also help you get ahead of your incoming cohort to gain some familiarity with the materials beforehand. But the most important role that it served for me was that it helped my brain to get back to the academic track, because working is pretty different from academic. And I've I've often heard from people who have left school for quite a while, and then go back to school. They're like, "Oh, it's not very easy to adjust to to adjust your brain from the professional working setting to the competitive academic." And like, you basically as a student never stop learning, right? Like 24 hours is just how much time you want to spend on studying. So it could get overwhelming in the beginning if you've been out of school for a while. The last thing I want to say is just, basically enjoy yourself in the process of applying. Might be hard to do, but I think for me, the satisfaction comes from, the fact that throughout the process of applying to different programs, I learned so much about myself, about my interests, and what I value by writing those, personal essays. Those are my advice.
I think those are great advice, especially for a lot of people that want to like apply to masters, but don't know really how to do it yet.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'll be happy to speak to you.
Of course.
Yeah.
Hopefully a lot of people would like you said, right? One of the important things is like reach out to people who actually have done the programs themselves to get a better judgment. So I guess we have one more like quick question.
Yeah.
But how was finding work after UCLA as opposed to finding work after your master's? Like just a quick like comparison.
Okay. Yeah, good question. So finding I think, okay, I have to start with this. Finding work is generally hard for international students, I think, if you are planning to stay for a while. Even if you are super competitive and you get sponsorship from like a consulting company, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to stay, because it's lottery system basically, right? If your company is a for-profit company. So after UCLA, okay, the difference after UCLA versus after Stanford, it's not apple to apple, really, because okay, UCLA I graduated in 2015. Yeah, 2015. At that time, I think things were fine compared to when I graduated from Stanford, which was 2020. As you all know, we were in the middle of the pandemic. It was the worst job market for a few years, and so there weren't a lot of options to apply to when I graduated from Stanford. Yeah, and like that's why I go into healthcare, because healthcare is one of the more I guess one of the few industries that are still rapidly expanding, just because we were in the middle of like a healthcare crisis basically during the pandemic. But in terms of like from the credentials that I have, so like with UCLA, it was only a BA, and I think a lot of people graduated with the same degree. And for international students, that could mean it would be harder for you to get sponsorship, just because they can just hire another American. Like unless you're able to bring to the table specific skill sets then that many of the people from your major doesn't have. So like, for example, in my major, it would be like data analysis or quantitative analysis skills. Not a lot of policy people have that skill, at least at the undergrad level, not that many. And so unless you have that very special skills, it's going to be harder for companies to justify hiring you. When I graduated from Stanford, although the economy was worse than in 2015 when I graduated from my BA, it was much better for me personally, because one, the brand name. So brand name really makes a lot of difference, especially if you stay in the Silicon Valley or like in the Bay Area, basically. It's like, oh, you graduated from Stanford. Perfect. I also went to Stanford. Like you can basically bump into like a lot of Stanford alums or Stanford associated people in the area. And that makes it easier to like forge some kind of bond with them. And that also means it's more likely that you will get a connection that would turn into something real, in terms of like work. And so like I definitely feel like the brand name really helped. But when I went back home to after UCLA, I don't think it matters that much, like UCLA versus Stanford, because UCLA is still pretty well known, well regarded in the world. So don't freak out. Like it's like don't think that, oh, brand name is everything. No, I don't think it matters like in other parts of the world necessarily. But in the Bay Area, it really helps. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers the question pretty well. I think we're going to
Yeah.
close it soon. So if Dixie could close it.
Yeah, so that's it, guys. We hope that you guys can get an insight on a life of a master's student both in the US and Indonesia. And once again, thank you so much, Chris, for attending this podcast. And I'm sure so many people are able to get so many insights from you and will find this helpful if they're applying or considering pursuing a master's degree.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for taking your time to host this
No problem.
podcast.
No
I think
problem.
what you're doing is great.
Thank you.
Yes, now all we need
Pro-
to do is market the podcast.
Yes.
Sounds like hard work, but
Yeah,
good luck.
usually. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. So yeah, without further ado, thank you everyone who's listening or watching this Ngobrol Yuk Alumni Edition podcast, and we'll see you in the next episode.